All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to folks in the department for coming to our fourth colloquium this semester. Thanks to folks from outside the department. I see that we've got folks from English and Native Studies and maybe other departments that I'm missing. We even have folks from outside the university. Welcome to our colloquium series in the Department of Geology and Geography. My name is Jonathan Hall. I am one of the hosts of this colloquium series. My partner in this endeavor is Chris Russinello. He just waved his hand there. We're just so excited to welcome Dr. Twyla Baker, someone who I've been following on Twitter and kind of interacted with, and just really excited to have the opportunity to have her come speak to us. I'm only going to read a little bit about Dr. Baker's bio before she talks to us about what she's here to talk to us about. Okay, so Dr. Twyla Baker is president of Nueta Hidatsa Sanish College. She is an enrolled citizen of the 3 affiliated tribes of Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara Nation of North Dakota. She lives and works on her ancestral homelands on Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in Northwest North Dakota. And she is here to talk with us about the cross-section of identity, academia, pedagogy, and Indigenous education. So without further ado, Dr. Baker, thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here with all of you in this very strange venue that we have often found ourselves in. We do the best that we can to adapt and overcome, of course. And it's an honor. It's a blessing to be here with you. Like Dr. Hall said, I am Dr. Twyla Baker. My Hidatsa name is Mia Ma'adawish, which in Hidatsa means woman of knowledge. And I didn't even give myself that name, I promise. Somebody else gave that name to me. So I come from an ancient people, and every single day, that perspective, where I come from, what I do, colors the decisions I make every moment. So I love sharing about where I come from and who we are as a people and how we, I guess, express ourselves. Express our humanity as Indigenous people, not just Indigenous people, pan-Indian by any means or anything like that, but as Hidatsa people, as Mandan people, as Arikara people. And if you are unfamiliar with Native people, there's over 500, there's probably well over 700 tribes in the United States. And the ones that you probably are the most familiar with are the ones that are in the, the Western movies and things like that, and the, headdresses and war cries and all that stuff. Well, my people, we're north of them, of those guys, we're north of them. So it's the Mandan and the Hidatsa people are one of the most ancient tribes along the Missouri River. My Nueta side, or Mandan, or Nueta is what we call ourselves, extends back 15,000 years, living here in the same, or at least a similar place along the Missouri River. We just found a really good spot, and we stayed there. And honestly, we made our life way. We learned, we had a intimate relationship with the land here. And honestly, my origin stories, the beginning stories that I was told when I was young, tell me that this place is in my DNA. It flows in my blood, and that's what I believe in. I mean, I have a doctorate, and I have a PhD and all that stuff, but I mean, I'm an Indigenous woman first. I was Indigenous, born to it, prior to going out and getting those that westernized education and all that. And I've got a PowerPoint. I'm going to start that up. I was telling Dr. Hall, I'm not a huge fan of PowerPoints, but they definitely keep me on track because I have a strong storytelling background. So y'all got to keep me on track. I'm going to share my screen here really quickly. Okay, and hopefully people can see that. Can I get a thumbs up if y'all can see that? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Like I said, Dr. Twyla Baker, it's my joy, it's my honor, it's my privilege to be here with you all. And I am a woman of the 3 affiliated tribes. I am, first and foremost, before everything else, I'm a woman of my tribe's people. And I often tell people that, yes, I'm a college president, but I am a community member who
Uh-oh. Did we lose Dr. Baker? Okay. We'll just pause and
I think I'll just go with my phone. That almost is an illustration of a point I'll make later on in the lecture. I promise I didn't plan for that to happen. But that also means that you guys don't have to look at my PowerPoint. So that's good. At any rate, where did I lose you? What was I talking about?
we were right at the beginning. So
I was right at the beginning.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, introducing
I think
myself.
you were still talking about, yeah, yourself and PowerPoints.
Oh, okay. So, well, it's all just a series of photos anyway. So, and I can definitely send that across for people to take a look at later on. But really, I was talking about tribal colleges. I was talking about whether or not folks had a depth in them. There's only 37 tribal colleges in the United States, and Nuita Hiratsa Sahnish College is one of them. We were one of the first to be established, but that doesn't mean we're terribly old. Tribal colleges are actually the youngest institutions of higher education in the United States, serving its oldest people. And I am, for my particular institution, NHSC, I'm the first president who's younger than the institution itself. So we have not been around too terribly long. Honestly, tribal colleges serve a very, I don't want to say niche, but very particular type of student. And we do very particular work. However, it's all incredibly crucial when you understand where we come from, where we're sitting, and the context that we function in. I often kind of like rub elbows with institutions that call themselves rural or like community colleges and schools of that nature, and their understanding of rural versus my understanding of rural are two incredibly different things. They'll often tell me, well, you know, we're rural, we only have 10,000 students. And I'm just like, yeah, you're not rural. That's a big population when you're talking about what we refer to as Indian country. And Indian country is actually a federal term. It's a legal term that describes tribally controlled lands. So when I say Indian country, I mean that in the federal sense when I use that definition. There's definitely colleges that exist in the urban centers as well. There's like, well, we would call them urban. I don't know if other people call them urban, but like Bismarck, North Dakota has a tribal college, as for example. United Tribes Technical College is situated right in Bismarck, North Dakota, which is 2.5 hours south of me. So that's just some depth and understanding of tribal colleges. There's a lot more to it, but we've only got so much time to share about this stuff. So, and I do want to get to some of the meat of what I'm going to be talking about here. During my lectures, I like to ask participants and people who are listening a very particular question, or actually it's kind of a series of questions, and for something for them to be thinking about and pondering on as we're talking. And that question is actually something that I ask myself pretty repeatedly, pretty often in and throughout my academic and professional journey. And those questions are, and you don't necessarily have to be Native for these things to be relevant to you, but those questions are, what are the gifts imparted to you by your culture, your society, where you come from, and what are your responsibilities to honoring that? I'm going to repeat that again. What are the gifts imparted to you by your culture, your society, where you come from, and what are your responsibilities to honoring that? So there's kind of a lot there, and I just want folks to be thinking about that as we're talking, because I'm going to circle back around to it and ask you the same question. So, and maybe we'll get a chance to discuss some of that and piece it apart. So at this point in the lecture, I'd have up in front of you this great big black and white screen that says the word lack in big white letters, lack. Okay, now I'm not sure how much background people have or understanding people have of Indigenous education in and of itself, but you probably definitely have seen like commercials around Native people, or like the stereotypical stuff that describes us as, you know, the noble savage, the stoicism, and you know, all of that mystical, magical stuff, and really describing us as if we weren't still around, as if I'm not sitting here talking to you right now, you know, really listening or talking about us in the past tense. And I talk a lot about lack and the word lack, because that's the perspective that it seems like the larger population speaks about us in terms of lack, what we lack as Indigenous people. Oh, it's so hard. Oh, it's so difficult. And granted, things, a lot of that can be true. A lot of that can be true. However, I work as an Indigenous educator from the perspective of plenty, basically. I work with young people. I work with young Indigenous learners. And how would it be if I were, as you know, Native auntie, coming to them, start talking about how much they lack, and put into their minds that no, well, you know, we've got we lack all of this stuff. We don't have any of those types of things. So at some point in my career, I can't even remember when, it was some time back, I stopped talking like that. I made a conscious decision that, you know what, that's really not serving our young people. That's really, what would I want to hear? What did I want to hear as a young person coming up in this education system, coming up in this Western education system that consistently told me that I lacked whatever. I didn't necessarily want to, you know, falsify or, you know, look at those perspectives through rose-colored glasses by any means, but I also knew where I came from. I knew what was at home. I knew that my parents were Indigenous speakers. Their first language was Hidatsa. I knew that my parents were knowledge keepers. They told me stories. They told me origin stories about where I came from, about old woman who never dies, who is a, you know, a mythical person in our legends and stories, about our origins from underneath the lake, under the water, how our people came down from the sky. You know, I knew that there was, I had this strong sense of, I didn't necessarily lack things. I mean, definitely no money, that, you know, that was definitely an issue for me. But I also knew that I was bringing an entire knowledge system and an entire different perspective, an entirely different worldview to every space that I was occupying when I was sitting in academia. And it didn't matter which class I was sitting in. It didn't matter which discipline we're talking about, whether it was my English classes or my science classes, because my background is in STEM. I have a degree in environmental geology and technology, a master's degree in education, and a doctorate in research methodology. It didn't really matter. I was bringing a different worldview. And slowly I realized that I didn't have to talk about my knowledge systems, the things that I learned and the way I, define my identity from a position of lack, because I did not lack. And as an now Indigenous educator on the other side of the desk, it is my responsibility to teach these young people that they already possess everything that they need in order to survive and in order to thrive in this Western education system. It just needs a little bit of polishing up. It just needs practice is what it needs. And I feel like as educators, if you're an educator, that you will understand what it is that I'm talking about. The next slide is a word cloud surrounding Indigenous education. This is probably about the only slide that I wish that you guys could see, because the word cloud itself is, it's this great big Indigenous education across the screen, and it's surrounded by other words that are, diametrically opposed to each other. Basically, these descriptors that are diametrically opposed to each other. There's words like cultural shift, practices, perspective, values, context, decentralized, environmental, empowerment, all of these incredibly empowering and strong and powerful words. But there's also taboo, unsustainable, schoolyard, bullying, let's see, I'm trying to look at the other ones. Sidelined, unequivocal, let's see, denigrated. So you can kind of probably understand how people look at Indigenous education, depending upon the perspective of the person who's looking at and trying to understand this concept in and of itself. The history in the past definitely shows up in a activity such as this, in a word cloud such as this, when you're talking about denigration, about assimilation policy, because Indigenous education wasn't just it was a tool of assimilation. It was a tool, definitely a tool of assimilation. All the way back to the beginning. I mean, you think about like these larger institutions like Harvard. Part of their mission was to, the whole kill the Indian, save the man type mindset. And other institutions, these Ivy Leaguers, these great big, well-respected institutions like Dartmouth, Stanford, other places, their whole, a lot of what they got started with was so that somebody like me would not be sitting here talking to you about what I'm talking about right now. And the reason why that happened is because they knew they could make a whole lot of money. People would donate to that cause at that time during colonial education period. So that's way back in the history, and I only like to try to cover history like glancingly. It's really difficult though to be able to understand these concepts without having that baseline understanding of the history in and of itself, because then you move into like the federal era of Indigenous education and BIA, BIE, Bureau of Indian Education, Bureau of Indian Affairs, which was under the War Department. And there's that whole huge history that one ought to have at least a baseline understanding of. It's like Indigenous Education 101 in order to understand the context and how we teach now. So I'm going to just kind of skip over that part because I've only got so many minutes with you guys, but talk about TCUs in the present. Now, I shared with Dr. Hall that this week is Tribal College Week in DC, and it's an annual thing. And typically I would be out in DC doing advocacy work, talking to our senators. I literally have a phone call right after this session with my senator, Senator Hoeven from North Dakota, to do advocacy work on behalf of tribal colleges and AHEC. AHEC is the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, which is kind of our advocacy group in DC, who does a lot of the legislative work, talking to our congressional delegations about bills, about equity, about funding, about a lot of different things. And we do a fair amount of advocacy work on our own behalf as well. So that's why I've gotten real good at that over the years as I've grown in this position. And I'm grateful for the fact that I'm able to do that alongside colleagues from other tribal colleges. And so, I mean, everything's changed because of COVID. And we're doing a different kind of advocacy. We've had to pivot very quickly based on the pandemic itself. Gosh, I sure wish I could show you guys the pictures. Because it's got a picture of my little college, Nuita Hiratsa Sahnish College. I actually carried out a plan based on the directive of my board of directors in 2015 and changed our name to Nuita Hiratsa Sahnish College, which is our ancestral names for our 3 tribes, from Fort Berthold Community College, which was basically kind of the bureau name for the land that we sit on. I am located in Newtown, North Dakota, on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, and I was born and raised here. I actually attended this institution of higher education shortly after high school, and then I jetted to a larger institution. But understanding some of this history will go a long ways to understanding and hopefully informing people's ability to teach Indigenous students. And tribal colleges are a huge part of that. I think we educate like 160,000 tribal students every year. And that might not seem like a whole heck of a lot, but when you think about the communities themselves, the size of our communities and impact of scale, it's a big deal what we do. When I'm able to send 7 or 8 or 9 GED graduates across the stage for my little community of 4,000, 5,000 people, that's a huge impact. And that's, so as the degree programs grow, when I'm able to get a bachelor's degree or somebody else, associate's degree graduate across the stage, it's a huge impact. And this is something that I'm explaining to a lot of my colleagues in mainstream institutions very often. You're going to find that the impact that tribal colleges have in larger institutions can be felt as well. Our graduates who transfer to larger institutions, to a 4-year and beyond institution, are 4 times more likely to complete at that mainstream institution. And there's a lot of reasons why. There's a lot of it. A lot of the students that we get don't necessarily have the scaffolding or necessarily the support systems or network for college life right out of high school. So that's part of what we do almost by default. We're teaching them about academic rigor. We're teaching them about the FAFSA, honestly. I mean, even just the details that, the nuts and bolts of being a college student, we're teaching them all of that. But we're also attempting to fulfill our mission in terms of serving who they are and their identity, and giving them that sense of pride and that sense of connectedness to a community, to a people, to a land, and a sense of purpose. I've heard multiple times, and hopefully other presidents might hear this in their lifetime, but I've heard multiple times in my short career and as president, the tribal college saved my life. And they're quite honest when they tell me that type of thing. These students come from backgrounds that would crush other people. I've had students who were attending classes and were living in their cars, homeless students. I've had students who have, there's been such an enormous academic failing for them in their K-12 systems. When they come to me, we're kind of doing a lot of catch-up work. And I have an amazing team who is able to give them the resources, the understanding, the support that they need to know that they can do this, they can get through. So we deal with any number of crises. We are very nimble. We can change quickly because we're small, but that also definitely comes with challenges in terms of being able to find people who can teach here, who are functional in our, I don't know how to say this nicely, who will live on a reservation, who will function in our context and who will thrive here and who have the commitment, because really tribal college work is hard work. It's hard work, but it's also hard work. When you consider the fact that these students, the starting line is not the same for my students as it is for other students, so when you see what it is that they have to deal with, and when you see them get across that stage with that diploma in their hand, there's no better feeling. I'm just getting choked up a little bit thinking about it. I think that's why I go so hard for them, because they go so hard for themselves. So just incredible stories, and there's so many of the Indigenous leaders that you might hear about in in the press, in the media. They came from tribal colleges. They are tribal college. They are our alumni. And that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. I'm thinking about our vice president, Madam Vice President right now. She came from an HBCU, which is one of our sister institutions. I am waiting for the day that we get a tribal college alum in a position such as that. And I'm probably going to be rattling my tongue and just screaming and happy all about that, So let's see. I'm going to skip down a little bit. So we are kind of daily dealing with a lot of the impacts of the colonial education that our students have been given. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. And there's some parallels with basically people of color in higher education institutions. It shows up as an example, imposter syndrome. That's this sense or feeling of not being enough. And I think I spoke a little bit about the whole not being enough type thing. And so we have to enact this cultural shift for our students, on behalf of our students, so that they understand that their knowledge systems, the understanding, the rigor, the just the knowledge, the brilliance of the people that they come from, comes from millennia of being in the same place and having that intimate relationship with the land, having that understanding, that observation time with each other. So our knowledge systems are just as valid as Western knowledge systems, if not more so, because we are living on our ancestral lands. And I often see people ask the question, whose land are you on? Land acknowledgements and that type of thing. It's kind of almost, I don't know, I don't want to call it a fad, but it's very popular too, land acknowledgements. Whose native land are you on? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it is all native land, every inch of it. It is all native land. So it would serve people to understand and know the ones who came before, who were here on this land before you, because it's all American history. It is all our story. Because it's the story of humanity. It's all of our story, my background, my history here on the Missouri River. This water and this land that flows in my blood, that is also your history. So, and we can't really be saying that we're going to serve our students well if we're not telling that story as well. So I'm going to jump down to translation exhaustion. This is a concept that Dr. Hall knows, and it's something that I came across, I think, out of sheer frustration, which is a lot of the way I learn. And I don't know, being a woman of color, I basically, get a little bit frustrated sometimes with these Western learning systems and knowledge systems and things. I'm not sure, I can only see 4 of you right now on the screen, so I don't know how many people are in the room right now, but I'll just talk about translation exhaustion a little bit and my seat as an Indigenous educator, the work that I do. We are all very much so experiencing this time of change together. And when I say time of change, I'm talking about social justice movements. The pandemic itself, of course, has exacerbated all of that, but it's also shown how vulnerable a lot of populations are. It's almost been a demonstration of those structural disparities that exist for people like me, and helping people to understand where those disparities came from and what their role is in deconstructing those structures. I end up doing a lot of educating. Educating and catching people up to the now and why, Indigenous people have an Indian health service, why we have something like that, because I'm like other people. I deal with a lot of the lack of knowledge, lack of depth, and misunderstandings. And I can definitely be subject to microaggressions at times. And a lot of those microaggressions can show up as Indians don't even pay taxes. You guys get free healthcare. You guys get free this or whatever, free education and stuff like that, all that type of stuff. So that's where translation exhaustion kind of comes in, because then I have to kind of back up and I have to explain the situation. And I try not to be snarky about it. Sometimes it can show up, but I mean, at other times I take my role as an Indigenous educator very seriously, and it shows up in every aspect of my life, not just when I'm sitting over at the college or on the phone or in a venue such as this. I feel like it's part of my purpose to talk about our history and continue to talk about our history so that other people hear it. I've expressed in the past the fact that speaking the truth about our history and not backing away from it, disallowing I guess guilt or tears or things to get me off track is a part of the act of love that I have for my fellow human beings. You tell the truth to people that you love. And even when that's hard truth, you tell the truth. You continue to tell that story. And I love my people. So I'm gonna tell the hard stories as well. I love non-Native people as well. So I'm going to continue to tell our truths and not back away, not make it pretty, not try to throw on the rose-colored glasses, continue to tell the honest truth. And people have a really hard time with that. People have a really difficult time reconciling. Probably, you know, sometimes I think that folks will see themselves in what I've said. Something will hit with them and they'll have that sense of discomfort. And you know what? That's not necessarily on me to make you feel better about that. It is on the individual to ask themselves, why am I feeling this right now? And explore it. And if you call yourself an ally or even better yet, an accomplice, you'll do that type of work. And hopefully people will continue to do and you know, deconstruct this work that kind of got the gasoline thrown on it last summer during all the protests and everything like that. Buying the book is not enough. You're going to have to read it. You're going to have to do the work yourself and really consider about what your role is and how you can assist. So one of the concepts that I came up with out of that frustration, like I told you, is called translation exhaustion. I'll read it off here for you. And it was written with the intent to be inclusive of other marginalized communities. Translation exhaustion is the idea that Indigenous people or any marginalized person or group engaging with the larger population on a given subject or topic related to bias must first set the stage in terms of historical context all the way to current day state of affairs before even addressing said topic of bias. And we do that over and over and over again due to the lack of education and background that the listener has. This is a direct impact of erasure of true Indigenous history beyond the cursory mention in our school systems. So to a degree, not knowing is not the listener's fault. It's not your fault. It's the fault of the education systems, of the systemic racism that exists in those systems. That's the thing that's at fault. However, what you do about it, once that knowledge is gifted to you, that is where your responsibility lies. That is, it's then becomes a question, okay, well, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? And I am not excused from that space either. Just because I'm a woman of color, I also have blinders on for certain marginalized communities. As an example, ableism. The disability community has taught me so much, and it's honest to goodness not their job to do so. But I have these amazing people who I trust and who trust me and want and see that I'm being honest about my wanting to be an ally and wanting to be an accomplice in their space and have a better understanding and understand the intersectionality of it, that I can come to them and I can ask questions, or they can point me to resources, what have you, so I can be a better, more well-rounded human being. So that's just an example. And I'm going to pull you guys out of the historical context. I think a lot of the time we have this sense that Native people exist in the past. You know, I mean, I struggle because right now there's this whole popular thing going on in Indian country of having those tin type photos. Those, you know, those old school photos, and they're beautiful. They are so gorgeous. I mean, I haven't had it done. The opportunity has not presented itself. However, there's something that kind of sticks in my craw with those photos. It's because they look old. Now, that's not problematic in and of itself, but it also places us in that antiquity mindset. You know, it places the popular, you know, culture into that antiquity mindset. And that's what I'm consistently fighting like all the time, trying to get people to, stop thinking of us in antiquity. I often challenge people, take a look at your references. Take a look at your education materials or what you've read, historical, your historical references for Indigenous people, and look and see if they refer to us in the past tense. Look and see how many times they refer to us in the present, with the present tense. See if that language exists there where they're talking about us in the past primarily, and you'll understand, you'll get at least a taste of what we're up against as Indigenous educators, because we are very contemporary. We are in the now. We are functioning. Like I said, we're on Capitol Hill. We're doing everything that we can. I think about Sharice Davids, Deb Holland. I think about my sister Ruth Buffalo, who are all elected leaders right now, and all of these people that are doing amazing things in the now. And I guess the hurdles that we come up against because we're spoken of in antiquity, as if we don't exist. It can be difficult. It can be tough. Gosh, I've got photos here of my dad, of my father, who was I'll tell his story really quickly here. He was a boarding school student, and if you have knowledge of or understanding of the boarding school era in Indian country, everything that they spoke about, all those kind of horror stories and stuff like that, that happened to my dad. That was my dad. He's still with us, thankfully. I love my dad. He lives off the reservation now. He's in a care facility in Bismarck. And however, he attended pure Indian school in the 1950s. He was sent there after his mother passed on at the age of 12, I believe, 10 or 12 years old. And my dad is an amazing gentleman. He was a basketball player. I'm 6'4". You guys can't see it, but I'm 6'4". He was an amazing basketball player, amazing athlete. He was, Hidasa was his first language. He managed to get a bachelor's degree in the 1960s in the Midwest. And all of that stuff sounds amazing, but when you consider where he came from and the difficulties that he had to overcome in order to do that, his story is incredibly inspiring. His story is amazing. So like 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Pierre, South Dakota, to go and be their keynote speaker for the South Dakota Indian Education Association. And I happened to go by his school, go by his old school. And I got to walk the grounds of the boarding school. He told me some of the stories of the things that happened to him when he was in Pierre, but not a lot until he got much older. And okay, did I lose you? You guys good? Okay. Anyway, so I'm walking around the grounds of Pure Indian School, and I'm getting all emotional because my dad was there when he was a little kid. And when he was first brought there, he managed to basically escape the school. He tried to run away. And he's just this little kid. The guy made it for 2 weeks, trying to walk up the Missouri River back to Fort Berthold, which is probably 500 miles if you walk along the river. 2 weeks at that age, he was sleeping in hay bales. He was drinking water from the river. He was foraging for his food and stealing every once in a while from local little stores and stuff. But being somebody that didn't speak the English language and going to an environment like that, I can't even imagine what he had to experience. At the end of the 2 weeks, he got a little bit lost because he tried to take a shortcut. And a farmer found him, and the farmer took him back to the school. And mind you, he tells me this story and he laughs about it. He got the beating of his life, and he stayed in school, and he managed to get a bachelor's degree. Anyway, I'm walking around Pure Indian School, where he was this all-star athlete. He literally was like all state, and he got selected to go to a college to go play basketball. all this other stuff. I'm walking along the banks of the river, the Missouri River there, and I'm having this moment thinking about how my dad had to survive there. And here I am, his daughter, one generation removed, standing at the banks. I'm a keynote for the South Dakota Indian Education Association, Dr. Baker. And I'm thinking to myself, I did it, Dad. I get so choked up when I tell that story, just because I love my dad so much, and I'm proud of what he survived and what we managed to survive every single day. Sorry about that. So I tell that story because I want people to know that we aren't antiquity. I want people to know that what we've managed to survive and now are thriving through is not way back in the ancient past. It's basically here all the time and present, and we're feeling it in not just my generation, but in younger generations. And historical trauma is a real thing, but so is historical strength. So is historical resilience. So it's just a matter of how we express it, how we exercise it, how we put it into practice every single day in our classrooms, in our daily lives. And it's not subversive or fringe or radical. It is evidence that this system, for one thing, the Western education system was never built for us in the first place. And it behooves us to take our education systems back and to not just propagate, but to revitalize our Indigenous education systems, because it doesn't just inform our lives as Indigenous people, it informs y'all's lives as well. And it adds to the mosaic. It adds to the whole big, beautiful mosaic of people that we are. And really, it's kind of like, it's almost like a triumph. I feel like just it's us being able to be who we are and to express our indigeneity every single day, to define it and redefine it and redefine it, is our right. It's our birthright. It's our responsibility. It's our privilege. It's our honor. It's our blessing to be who we are as Indigenous people. And I want to express that to everybody, to everybody, so that they have that understanding that you too, doesn't even matter if you're not Indigenous, you come from someplace, you have a history. And whether you have an understanding of that or not, whether you are plugged into that history or not, I would encourage you highly, look into it. There's strength there, there's resilience there. So let me see. Okay, circled back around to the end of, oh my gosh, of the lecture. Hopefully I haven't lost everybody. Okay, so if you remember the question that I asked you at the beginning of this this talk, I want you to revisit that now, and hopefully you've had a moment to kind of think about it and really kind of ruminate on that a little bit. What are the gifts imparted to you by your culture, your society, where you come from, and what are your responsibilities to honoring that? And I think I'm going to leave that question in the air now to wrap things up and hand it back over to Dr. Hall.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Baker. I think, at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, and I imagine maybe other folks feel the same way. I'm just sort of, I think, at a loss for words to sort of process your presentation, and I just want to thank you so much for being so open and talking about yourself and your experience and your family, but also challenging us to really take a deep dive within ourselves to think about how we interact, how we understand ourselves, how we understand the lands that we occupy, right? And the people who have come before us if we're not Indigenous, and who we're responsible to. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's just so much for us to take from what you've you've gifted us today. And so with that, we're going to do something a little bit different to how these colloquia function. So I want to give you a break for 5 minutes or so that you can, take care of the things that you need to take care of. And then, if you're willing and able, to invite you back. And in the meantime, I will create a set of breakout rooms for folks to go into so that we can kind of process with each other, think about some of the things that are on the top of mind for us. So for those of you all who'd like to stick around for the discussion and for the conversation, please do. And I will, in maybe like 1 or 2 minutes, and allow people who can't stay to go and do what they need to do. But for those who are going to stick around, please stay, and then I will place everyone into breakout rooms of, I don't know, depending on how many people we have, 3 to 5 folks, where we can all talk amongst ourselves. So
Okay.
in 2 minutes, I will do that. So if you need to leave, thank you so much for coming. If you'd like to stay, please stick around. And in 2 minutes, I'll do that. And then let's say, are you able to stay past the top of the hour, Dr. Baker?
Yes, I am. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So let's say 3 minutes past the hour is when I will welcome everybody back from their breakout groups. Okay. So in 2 minutes, I will put people in breakout groups, and then we'll have 5 minutes to talk amongst ourselves. And then we'll all come back to have a discussion at 3 minutes past the hour. Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you.